Joining me now is Rachel Lears. She is the director of Knock Down the House. It's on Netflix now. It's the movie about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and 3 other candidates who ran for office, helped by groups Brand New Congress and Just Democrats, winning awards at Sundance and so many others. Rachel, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Cenk. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. So you've done a number of projects. You did The Hand That Feeds, and that was also nominated for an Emmy. That was about undocumented immigrant workers organizing in New York delis and many others. So first question is, why this one and how did you even find it?
Yeah, so I have been making films about politics and social movements for a while, but I was between projects in 2016. I had a baby early in that year, and when the election happened in November, I was looking for a new project, and I really wanted to find something that would contribute to the national conversation, and in particular, on the left, find a project that would really encapsulate a national story of people from very different backgrounds coming together to find common cause in unexpected ways. I had followed the election very carefully through the primary and the general election, and I just wanted to, find a story that would challenge the idea that there was some kind of inherent choice between caring about economic issues and caring about racial justice and gender justice, that type of thing. So I had heard about Brand New Congress. I had read about them a few months earlier in The Nation, and I reached out to them that day and started the conversation about a documentary project. Very quickly, the conversation included Justice Democrats as well. At that time, some of the same organizers, a lot of the same organizers were involved, and so they started contacting me with candidates, and by March 2017, we were having our first real shoot, which you see in the film. It's actually the moment when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez commits to running for office, and through the course of those first few months in 2017, we got in touch with probably a couple dozen candidates, limiting ourselves to the BNC and JD slates, and we really wanted to drill in on that no corporate funding, candidates who are going to be running grassroots campaigns who really came from the communities they sought to represent. Originally, the project was going to be about political outsiders generally, not necessarily focusing on women, but as the story of the wave of women running in the 2018 midterms became a big story, it felt to me like a natural fit to focus on that. And these 4 really stood out to me as well for their very personal high stakes reasons for running.
Yeah, I want to get to why you picked those 4 in the first place. But look, when The Nation wrote that article, almost nobody in the country knew about Brand New Congress. And let me just pause here to fill in some blanks for folks who are a little confused about Brand New Congress and Justice Democrats. Real quick, Brand New Congress is first, and Zach Exley and Shoykat Chakrabarti, who's now the chief of staff for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, helped to found that group. And that's why you'll see it a lot in the movie, and they'll wear the shirts throughout the movie that are Brand New Congress shirts. And they were trying to help progressives in both Democratic and Republican parties, and they still are, and they still exist. But a lot of the folks in Brand New Congress moved to Justice Democrats when we founded Justice Democrats to just be for progressives in the Democratic Party. And so it's not much of a distinction. It's not an important really distinction. It's just that you should know that the main group that exists today is Justice Democrats that AOC and the others are part of. Brand New Congress still exists, and you should look into them. And the people who are there are wonderful. And in fact, I believe the person that's at Brand New Congress is the person who specifically found Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So great work on their part. But when they wrote that article about Brand New Congress, I don't think Justice Democrats necessarily even existed.
They didn't exist at that time.
Yeah,
that's right.
And so almost no one had heard of them. What made you think that putting a couple of years of your life into this would be fruitful?
Well, I think, it was the story as I read it at that time, and it was in the summer of 2016, was what are the organizers from the Bernie Sanders campaign doing next? And I was very interested in that. I was very interested in the fact that these people had the experience with the distributed organizing wing of the Sanders campaign, and I was interested in the idea of Congress and taking some of the focus away from the presidency. It's only one of the branches of government after all, and really kind of delving in a little deeper to what representation looks like at the broader national scale outside of these individuals that become our presidents every couple of years. So I was very interested as a filmmaker in the individual stories of people who were not career politicians and what it would take on a personal level to transform yourself into a viable candidate for federal office. And as I said as well, I was really interested in the solidarity aspect of people from across the country coming together. And then as Justice Democrats came into the picture, in the first a few months of my working with BNC, Shoykat Chakrabarti and Corbin Trent and many of the other organizers became involved with Justice Democrats. I was very interested in that approach as well, to specifically targeting Democratic primaries and putting forward alternatives to the politics as usual that we are used to in the Democratic Party. So I actually I personally think it's a strength of the film that it only focuses on Democratic primaries. There's no competitive general election race documented in the film. It allows the film to really explore the relationships among money, party politics, and grassroots movements, and take the conversation out of the Democrat versus Republican conversation, which is of course an important conversation to have. But I want to get past that, and I want to get really to the root of what representation is. And I think primaries are such a vital part of our democratic process. It's crazy to me that they should be controversial at all. And I felt like the issues that I was interested in weren't going away. I mean, you asked what made me think that this would be a good topic or what would make it worth 2 years. The issues aren't going away. We're talking about the relationship between money in politics and representation in politics. When you have campaigns that cost millions of dollars, only certain kinds of people are going to run for office. It's going to be biased towards independently wealthy individuals and people with like large Rolodexes of big donors. So if we want to see true representation for regular working people, we've got to combat the campaign finance system. I mean, you talk about this all the time. Obviously, I know your listeners are on board with this. And I was just really interested in those issues combined with the personal story of these non-career politicians and what that would look like for them on a human level.
So it must have been super hard to leave things on the cutting room floor as you're editing the movie, because when you talk about unity, one of the parts of the story that I loved overall in the whole election cycle was when some of the Just Democrats lost, they would then go help the other campaigns. Brianna Westbrook sticks out for me because she went and helped out on a couple different campaigns. And then when AOC won, she then went and helped the others that had not yet won. And so that was such a great sense of unity and camaraderie. So how hard was it to edit this movie and to get it down to about an hour and a half?
It was really hard, and that was absolutely the hardest part to leave out. We were very interested in the camaraderie and the mutual support that the candidates gave one another, and there were a lot of pieces of that didn't end up in the film. For example, it ended up working better for the film to put Cori Bush's primary before Alexandria's in the way we told the story, even though, of course, it did happen in August after the New York primary. And Alexandria went to St. Louis to support Cori in that primary. But and that was a fantastic set of scenes that we had, and it was really painful to not be able to include those in earlier drafts, and we thought we would. But when you're making a documentary, it's very much it's an art and it's a science. There's an intuitive process of trying to figure out what's the internal logic of the material. There's going to be great things that you missed because you just couldn't get them for whatever reason, and there's going to be great stuff that you did get that nevertheless, when you put it in, it somehow takes away from the strength of the whole. So that is just an incredibly difficult process, and we tried to the best of our ability to indicate that this is a movement and that these candidates are supporting one another, and we're not going to have real change unless we have that kind of working together around the country. And so,
right.
That's in the film, but of course there are aspects of it that you can't cover every detail.
Rachel, was there ever pressure that you felt to only make the movie about AOC after you knew the outcome?
Yeah, we started to get a fair amount of industry interest in the project after she won. Before that, we had actually had a hard time getting support for the project. We ran a Kickstarter campaign. TYT was really influential in helping us with our Kickstarter campaign in March of 2018. So thank you guys so much for that. I hope there are some of our Kickstarter backers watching tonight. But after she won her primary, of course, there was more interest in the project. And a lot of people, a lot of industry types, production companies, distributors, were interested in whether we'd consider that. But to be honest with you, we never considered that, because the whole idea of this film was to explore what it looks like for ordinary people to stand up and challenge political machines. And we knew that story was going to involve some loss. And we thought it was certainly possible that all four of the candidates might lose, but we would still have a good story. You've got these incredible people with their personal backstories, and as well as the fight that they're bringing to the campaigns. But we really wanted to explore the nature of power and what are the roadblocks to a paradigm shift. And so it was always part of the puzzle to explore loss, and of course each of the four candidates that we followed brought something very specific to the story as well, with their personal stories, with the specific issue areas that their personal experience intersected with, whether it's healthcare or environmental justice or police accountability. So all of that, we just never considered losing it. And again, we're looking for something that's greater than the sum of its parts. So actually, the main reason that Alexandria does have more screen time is because we were based in New York and so was she. So even before she won, we knew that she would have more screen time than the others, just by virtue of the fact that we had more material with her from the early stages when we were fitting this project in between freelance gigs, just not able to travel as much.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how did you pick the four? I mean, there's different theories. The first two candidates I ever talked to were Cori Bush and Paula Jean Swearengin. So one theory is that they were the early ones, but you had a lot to choose from, a lot of different folks. So why those four?
I mean, there were so many great people on the Justice Democrat slate, and we ended up working with Brand New Congress and Justice Democrats through the process. So we did limit ourselves to those that were on both slates, and I interviewed probably 24 candidates, and it was really hard to choose. We did have to choose people whose primaries were not on the same day as one another, because that was going to be the production process of going through. We also had to, we couldn't choose anyone whose primaries were in March during 2018, because that was when our Kickstarter campaign was happening. We just didn't have we weren't able to raise the funds in time to cover those primaries. So there were a lot of those logistical kind of questions. We wanted a certain amount of geographical diversity and people from different backgrounds and areas kind of in the story. So a lot of those factors, but really these four, I think, because of their very personal motivations and the very personal ways in which their experience connects to policy, and they made that part of their just the cornerstone of their campaigns. In the case of Paula Jean Swearingen, the fact that she's lost so many family members and members of her community to illnesses related to the fossil fuel industries. In the case of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her experience in the financial crisis, losing her father when her family was itself plunged into a financial crisis at that time, and she went through so much. And also, growing up between two worlds in the Bronx and Westchester, New York, really understanding economic inequality at that deep personal level. And of course, Cori Bush with her experience as a frontline Ferguson activist, and Amy Vilela with her the tragic story of her daughter who died as a result of our profit-driven healthcare system, where she was turned away from a hospital where she couldn't provide proof of insurance. So each four of those stories brought something really emotionally powerful to the table. And that was really the basis for our decision there.
So I always wonder about that, Rachel, whether you as a director know you're gonna make people cry. Because I've now had people come up to me over and over again, tell me different scenes that they cried at. Whether it was the Amy Vilela story with her daughter, or AOC's story with her dad, or Paula Jean's story of all the people she lost to cancer, and the list goes on and on. Like when you shoot that, I mean, there's two different parts, right? When you're editing it, are you thinking, this is gonna get them, right? And when you shoot it, like you're behind the camera or wherever you are, do you think like, oh, that's a good scene?
Yeah, I mean, both of those things would happen. I mean, I was shooting primarily by myself, and I would cry in certain moments. It's hard not to when someone is sharing this kind of stuff with you, and certainly also in the edit, you kind of know it's working if it makes you cry. After you've seen it 50 more times, it stops making you cry. But that is part of the process, and it's funny. There's this whole, I think, social media and even there's even whole articles about crying in this film and the way it represents candidates crying, and that's not something that candidates usually show, but showing vulnerability can be a source of strength and power rather than a liability. And then people are talking on Twitter a lot about the crying. So somehow crying has become the one of the big takeaways of the film. But I think that speaks to the emotions that people have about politics. And we really wanted to connect the human stories that anyone can relate to the layers of political analysis and structural thought that goes into the making of something like this. That's what we're trying to do, is create something that works on multiple levels. So, anyone can relate to the human story, but hopefully you'll be drawn into the deeper levels of thinking about campaign finance reform, or the relationship between money and politics and representation. And hopefully the crying can help open up a space for that.
Yeah, and the name Crying Game was already taken, so I get it. I actually want to show a part of the clip. I want to go to video 2 here about hanging on by a thread that gives you a sense of the drama in the movie. Let's watch that.
I started waitressing when the financial crisis hit. My dad had passed away. Working in a nonprofit just wasn't enough for our family because we were about to lose our home. You're trying to make a $300 student loan bill here and your foreclosure installment here. You just do your best to survive. That's been the reality for millions of people in this country that feel like they're just hanging by a thread, and they feel like no one's fighting for them and everyone's just in it for themselves.
Okay, so when you were following her around, and she's, when we did a day in the life of AOC before the primary, she's getting on the bus, she's walking in the neighborhood, etc. You show her going to her day job as a bartender. Okay, be honest, what percentage chance did you think she had of winning?
Well, Percentage, I never put a number on it. I mean, I knew the strategy. I knew that the win number was lower in that district than in many districts around the country. So I knew it was possible. I knew that, with any of these grassroots campaigns, you're talking about activating groups of voters who don't usually participate in midterm primaries, and that all bets are off with polls and with expectations when you're doing that. By the time her primary rolled around, I had already seen the losses in West Virginia and Nevada with Paula and Amy, respectively. And they had a lot of momentum on the ground too. I could see, obviously, in the last month or so of Alexandria's campaign, there was a ton of attention and just buzzing around on the ground. There were so many volunteers involved, but I didn't know whether that was going to translate. So I remember as late in the day just feeling like I have no idea what's going to happen. And she was sort of treating it that way too. She wasn't necessarily doing the whole positive thinking, I know I'm going to win, I know I'm going to do this kind of thing. She was very realistic about the fact that, she knew it was winnable, but that there was also a significant chance that she might not win. So I did not know until the moment that she won. I don't know about percentages, but I definitely,
right.
I was about as surprised as she was when the numbers came in.
Yeah. So time for only one last quick question. So politically, did you learn anything from tracking them all that time about how to win? Is there any lessons that just Democrats or anyone else can use in 2020?
Well, I think that if you were to ask me why she won and others didn't, there's a combination of factors. You always have to think about, in any race, there's the candidate, the incumbent, the dynamics of the district. In case of these types of campaigns, you got to look at what's the progressive base in that area. And there was a huge progressive base that was available to be activated in New York City, more than existed in some of these other areas. So I think that there's a lot. You just have to look at each case individually, but I think it's very important for a candidate to have a compelling personal story, and I think that we just have to keep doing this, and all of these races involve legions of volunteers, and I know that you were on top of this before anybody. You're been involved with JD from the beginning, so your listeners are probably familiar with all this stuff. But we're hoping with the film to really reach an audience that maybe doesn't follow politics as much, but who can be drawn in by the personal story and then taken a step or 5 further to getting involved with the political process. Because I think the more people that are involved, the more democratic our representation is going to be. The more, these progressive policies are very broadly popular, and getting more people involved is the key to it. So I think just keeping on with that is going to be the key to moving forward.
Yep. All right, Rachel Lears, director of Knock Down the House. It's on Netflix now. There's also knockdownthehouse.com. It's the winner of the Sundance Festival Favorite Award, and it will make you cry. Rachel, thank you for joining us.
And I say one more thing, that it is available for community and educational screenings, so you can find out more on the website, knockdownthehouse.com.
All right, excellent. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Cenk.